Hello and welcome to another episode of the TheCodercareer podcast with me, Cameron Blackwood. If you haven't come across us before, I'm an ex-technical recruiter who's now become a software engineer, and I've created this podcast as a way to explain my perspective from both sides of the table. Now, my guest today is a seasoned recruiter and my former boss. His name is John Hazelton. He's currently a partner of a consultancy called The Pioneers. And John, would you like to introduce yourself a little bit?
Hi, Cam. Thanks for having me. I'm really happy to be on here. And as you said, my name is John Hazelton. I am a partner here at the Pioneers, and what we're doing is we're culture engineers. We're trying to help companies as they scale, create nice places to work, and we're doing that through our thing called the People Operating System, which we can go into a little bit later on if you want.
Sounds good. Sounds very exciting. Now, normally what I like to do at the start of these podcasts is go through some quick fire questions so the audience can get to know you a bit better. I may know some of the answers here, so I'll be curious how much I already know about you, having worked together previously. So question number one, without further ado, what was your very first computer that you used?
Well, it depends what we're talking about computer. The first thing that comes to mind when I think of computer is probably my Sega Mega Drive, my 16-bit Sega Mega Drive.
Oh, classic machine.
Yeah, classic machine. Old school games. I could still play it now.
Yeah, 16-bit, wasn't it? So was that sort of I guess that would have been 95-ish. Am I right on that?
You trying to say I'm getting very old, Cam? Is this the
No, I'm not trying to say I'm getting very old, but
yeah, it was when it was the days before FIFA, or just before the original FIFA started coming out. So it was like blobs of heads to play football and a racing game where you're static and the image was moving. So yeah, it was that old.
It's definitely come up before, and obviously our old colleague Sam, he said he was talking about his Commodore 64, and he was saying his favorite game was the Neighbours video game, delivering sort of a pixelated paperboy delivering papers around Erinsborough. I think it's called, the town is in the TV show. So there are some absolute classics. I think I missed that sort of 16-bit era. I grew up on sort of PS1. PS2 and sort of Vice City, that sort of thing when I was far too young to be playing it. That kind of
like everyone.
That kind of thing. I've told the story in the podcast before actually, but I got in a lot of trouble when my mum caught me playing Vice City when I was 6. But it was a classic game. I got very interested in sort of 80s Miami as a young child as a result of it. So, who says they're not educational?
Many a lost hour.
Yeah. So talking of cities anyway, for the next quick fire question, what's your favourite tech city?
This is a boring answer, but it's London. I don't think there's a...
London's not a boring place. London's never a boring answer.
I know, but it's the safe answer. But I think maybe it's just because it's where I've spent most of my time. Paris is very cool as well. Berlin's got a good tech scene. But for me, I feel like the community in London, the breadth and the wealth of knowledge of what is in London, I think is amazing. I'm just interested to see how this pans out post Brexit, post pandemic, to see how those networking kind of events and that kind of like networking ability to do that in London, how that pans out, because that was, I think, integral to the London tech scene and quite unique as well. So there, let's see how it goes. But for me, I'd say London.
Yeah, pub culture kind of lends itself very nicely to networking, and it will be interesting to see the remote work kind of trends to see how people. I think people will still congregate. Like I'm a full remote employee now, and my new employer is actually in Birmingham rather than London, so it's the Silicon Canal rather than near Silicon Roundabout. But we're sort of going to do sort of meetups in central Birmingham once this is all blown over. I'll come down from Scotland for that. But London's an amazing tech city, and so many iconic companies have both already come out of there and are being built there right now. And I'm just excited for the future for it. And with access to remote employees throughout the UK as well, things are only going to get better, I reckon.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of investment as well. The investment's still there for London. I think that's going to be the key. As long as the money and the investment's coming in, there'll be opportunities for sure.
Yeah. as a general trend as well, venture capital money is flowing towards Europe because American investors have realized that European startups are relatively undervalued compared to those on the west and east coast of the US. So I think that's an exciting trend. And, there's never been a better time if you're in London, Paris, Berlin, every disco that I'm in. You can start a startup. There's never been a better time to get funding
Yeah.
because the attention is really swinging towards Europe now. So it's an exciting trend for sure. What about when you're doing your work? Are you more of a music or a podcast man?
I do love a good podcast, but I think during work hours, I'm typically listening to audiobooks instead. I quite like to have that on in the background. Yeah, I suppose the last one I was listening to, or the one I'm listening to at the moment is, do you know the Heath brothers, Dan and Chip Heath? There's they've got a book out called, yeah, there's one called Upstream. Um, I did read the book, but then I've just been listening to it again. It's just fantastic. It's just about a way of thinking and how you approach problems, and thinking upstream solutions rather than downstream, like reactive solutions. It's really interesting. So yeah, I do love I do like a podcast. My guilty pleasure podcast is the Ricky Gervais podcast, just to help me sleep.
Is that
That's
the
my
old
guilty
ones or
pleasures.
the new
The
ones?
Deadly Series. I listen to a lot of his stuff, but my main my main one is the stuff they did with Carl Pilkington and Steve Merchant. It's
Yeah, I
it's a
love that as
it's
well.
a real guilty pleasure, I've got to admit. I mean, it's not really fulfilling anything other than just a bit of escapism, and yeah, it just makes me laugh, and it's just an easy thing to listen to fall asleep.
Yeah, they're one of those things that's aged so well. Like it's funny you're saying about it because I was actually listening to it the other day. It's all on Spotify, and
Yeah.
they're talking about Live 8 is on later today. I was thinking Live 8, and then I looked it up. I was 9 when that happened. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, arguably, you'd say that Gervais, that they were the ones that like really brought podcasting like
mm,
mainstream. I think that there's a lot to
they
say
were.
for the stuff they did.
Mm. Yeah, they were number one podcast in the world for like 3 years running, and they were the ones that brought about the medium. And yeah, it was because podcasting had a bit of a kind of birth around 2005 to 2007. Because I remember being a young teenager and sort of downloading a few of the but I guess they hadn't figured out the format properly. Like I used to download the best of Radio One this week podcast and that kind of thing, and the kind of format hadn't been fully figured out as it has been in the last few years. Because now we've had a boom over the last sort of 3 to 4 years.
Yeah, exactly. There's so much good content out there, and so much bad content as well. There is a lot of not so good content, but there's
I hope you're not talking about the Coder Career podcast available on all good streaming platforms.
absolutely not. That's the up and
Cool.
coming.
I was surprised that you weren't going to say about your 7 a.m. drum and bass sessions that you used to talk about talent, like where you get in before everyone else and just blast your drum and bass and get a load of
Yeah,
work
there
done.
is this. Yeah, I mean, I was talking this. A friend of my wife's, so she's staying for a few days, and we were talking about this, and she was saying how she's got this like um, lo-fi type music she listens to concentrate, and I was like, if I need to concentrate, it's very loud, intense music. Whether it's, people think I'm a bit crazy for saying this, but I feel like there's a correlation that I can concentrate very well with drum and bass with no words and classical music with no words. Everyone says there is absolutely no parallel between the two. There is nothing the same. But for me, I find that really easy to concentrate. So yeah.
Yeah, I see what you mean. I like a bit of drum and bass to code to for sure. I like it. I was saying to Liska, who was on the podcast the other day, this is super embarrassing, but I've been listening to the Mr. Robot soundtrack while I code because it makes me feel like I'm much better than I actually am. And it's also an amazing soundtrack, to be fair.
Yeah.
And that's really good. But yeah, I like a bit of drum and bass while I'm coding. I think it's something to do with like maybe the consistent BPM, as you said, the lack of lyrics as well. Is probably behind it. But yeah, I think I do remember you discussing that quite a lot. I remember asking your advice on productivity. You were like, "You should just get into the office at 7 a.m. and listen to drum and bass with me." I was thinking,
Yeah, I
no,
mean,
I get up
whatever.
at
Or
8:50.
what? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, I'm a pretty. I prefer to get up, but for me, I'm more of an early riser type person. I like to get up, I like to get in, get on, and I'm not a late. I don't like working into the wee small hours. That's not my. It's not my thing. I can't do it. I much prefer being up early.
That was actually my next question. I think it's an interesting one. People are definitely trending towards, especially with remote working, sort of being an early bird and sort of getting some work done beforehand, like or even just getting out the door. And I'm a big believer now in what in sort of just getting some sunlight in my eyes, like as early as possible throughout the day, just to sort of set my brain right. Because I have had a tendency with remote work. I mean, you managed me before, and you know I'm not whilst punctual, maybe rolling in at exactly the right time uh, in the mornings. It was. It's always been something.
Did you just move up to Edinburgh though, Cam? And you want to get some sunlight? I mean, I don't know if you're going to be able to do that with all that rain cloud, are you?
It's a tropical. It is a tropical city up here. That's Glasgow where it rains. On the east coast of Scotland, it is sunny all the time. Like we have very early sunrises through the summer. Actually, the winter not so much. But I've got a Lumi, so I'll be fine.
No, I'm half Scottish myself, so I know the trials and tribulations of the weather up there.
Yeah, it's very unpredictable. What about when you're actually working? Are you what power is it? Is it coffee or tea?
Used to be tea, and then I joined a European company, and now I'm more coffee man now. I even invested in a little coffee machine for myself. Yeah,
Is that like espressos and that kind of thing?
absolutely. Yeah,
Very nice. And what about if you weren't working sort of in recruitment, or I should say more company building these days? What would you
yeah.
be doing instead?
I would. I'd love to be an astronaut, Cam. Don't
Nice.
know if that's a
That's an out
realistic.
of this world answer.
I don't know. I don't know if that's a real. I don't, no, that's definitely not a realistic aspiration. But no, I'd love to be. I think maybe doing something outdoors. Don't know what. I haven't really ever thought about that. Maybe being something like, or maybe a police investigator, something like that. That could be quite cool.
Hmm,
I could
nice.
imagine.
Yeah, that's a pretty interesting variety of roles. Like
Oh yeah, yeah. I haven't, as you can tell, I wasn't prepared for that answer. Yeah.
well, I mean, to be fair, mate, I want to be a professional rugby player, and I think that you being an astronaut is more realistic than me being a professional rugby player. um,
Although, based on those Lions performances, we probably should have. We're probably going to need more. Need you, Cam.
yeah, probably get me in at 10, pinging in some balls to the corner. Anyone who doesn't know about rugby has got not a clue what we're talking about right now.
No,
Probably thinks we're
no,
talking about a
absolutely not.
safari.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
so we're talking sort of technical recruitment in general. What was it that led to you working in our industry?
Um, like most people, I don't think you grow up thinking I want to be a technical recruiter. It was one of those things that I more fell into. I knew that I had this like intrinsic thing to want to help people and to do something in that space. Um, and recruitment generally has a low barrier to entry to get into this type of job, and if you're quite successful you can move quite quickly through that system, and that's basically how I got into it. I was in London. A lot of my friends were working in London. I wanted a job in London so I could experience that, and yeah, an opportunity came along, and I had a couple of jobs in recruitment in over the years. Yeah.
Okay, nice. Because you started out, I might have remembered this completely wrong. Didn't you do a state agency for a very brief period of time, or have
For a
I totally made that
very
up?
No, 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 I did for an extremely brief amount of time. Um, it was more of the case, I think my car had broken down. I don't know how old I was very young. And they said, "Oh, there's this job. You can get a free car and a free mobile phone and commission and all this sort of stuff." And I was like, "Wow, sign me up. Let's do it." And then I realized I definitely didn't want to do this very quickly. And then, like I said, a lot of friends moved into this, like really into the city. So I was like, "Oh, let's see what this is all about."
It's funny. It's funny you mentioned that you fell into it because I think literally you were probably the fourth technical recruitment professional I've spoken to that has said to the exact T, I fell into it.
Yeah, exactly. And it was, I think it's typical for most people. Um, but I knew quickly that's not where I wanted to stay doing. I felt that there was a lot of inefficiencies and not very good practices in that space. Like for every good thing going on in that space, I think there's a lot more not so good things going on, and very outdated, uninnovative ways of working. When I first started out, obviously there's a lot has changed since then, and that's kind of what helped me move more towards kind of like a general manager type role, and then obviously working with other companies as well to try and help them improve their processes and stuff like that. But yeah, to be fair, like without it, I wouldn't have been able to take the path that I took. So I'm very grateful for the industry for that. But I do think there's a lot that needs to be fixed in that space.
Yeah, I echo that sentiment. I think there's a lot of people doing really positive work towards fixing it for sure, and I'm really grateful for the path I took, because doing that, I worked for a company that, you know, I didn't like how we operate, how we operated sometimes, and then I worked for you at Talent IO, which I really enjoyed, and I felt like we were bringing sort of some sort of positive change around, and it's thanks to the experience I got working at those two places that I was able to learn about code, really. So I'm forever thankful that I worked in technical recruitment, even if I found even I worked for an agency that I found a bit tough for a while, a little bit of chaos going on, and sort of like a lot of noise and air horns and music in the office when a deal went off and that kind of thing. It wasn't really me. I realise I'm a bit more of a try as I might to be a Jordan Belfort. I'm a bit more of an IT guy, really.
But yeah, no, I know what you mean. I completely agree. It's one of those industries that is enormous, so you can't ignore it. It generates so much every year, and it does fill a need of people, but I just don't know how much of a positive need it's fulfilling. There's yeah, I think there's a lot more things that people could be doing internally ultimately to progress their business rather than just relying on agencies. I think it could be a part of the strategy for more like bespoke and sheer volume. I get the reasons why you would use it, but you have to make sure that they're adhering to your company brand and your employer brand and your candidate experience, that type of stuff, and not just being left off to their own devices. But as a whole other topic.
Yeah, yeah, no, definitely. And I guess if we're talking about the recruitment side of things, what would you say makes a candidate stand out? I mean, this is completely deviation from what we were talking about, but obviously both of us recruited junior candidates quite a lot over our careers. And is there anything that, you know, makes people stand out if they're looking for that first or second job in tech and they want to stand out from the crowd?
I think it's a good question. I think I can answer that quite. I can answer that quite well. I think just because we're actually hiring for our company at the moment, the Pioneers, we're actually hiring for a junior
What a
developer.
segue.
Yeah, I know, right? And we're when we're talking junior, I think it's very important to differentiate. There's two kind of paths. You can either come from being a grad, or you can go down the path that you've gone. Is that you've retrained, right? You've retrained in something, and I think that both avenues are very valid, and they both bring different perks and benefits, but then there's also some challenges with both. So I think in answer to your question, what do we look for? Um, Everything has to be focused on what success looks like in the job. So I think it's not necessarily what we're looking for in the candidate to start off with. I think it's how well a company defines what they need for somebody to do well in that position first. And if you haven't done that properly as a business, your due diligence, then it's very difficult to assess somebody. But if we're talking about just about standing out, I think it's about passion, um, presenting no massive ego, having a desire to learn, demonstrating they've got a good work ethic, and being very genuine. And what I mean is, you don't have a professional persona and a personal life persona. You're just you. I think that's very important to get that across. I think pretty much all of this goes across most junior roles, not just tech junior roles. But I think that's going to be really important. Um, like for example, I was speaking to somebody the other day who interviewed, and because they hadn't got any Node.js experience, not that we require it, but it's something that we said we might look to use, in preparation for the interview, they actually did a course on Node.js a week before in prep for the interview. like, and I was like, oh, that just shows initiative. It shows that people are going above and beyond. So I think it's that showing that willingness as well. And I've probably said about 10 different things here, but I think main things: passion, no ego, desire to learn, be yourself. They're probably the top four.
Yeah, that's so important, and I absolutely love that example you brought up about the candidate in the interview, and people that are listening now thinking, "How can I get that first job?" That's a fantastic example of how you can go out there and make yourself stand out. Because don't be afraid if you see a nice to have that you've never worked with. But if you want to impress an employer, go and do a basic course in it. You don't have to be an expert, but like you can easily get a job in a framework you're unfamiliar with. Like I got a job doing Angular work when I'd never touched it before, and it was something where I went away and I did a course in TypeScript and Angular, which I'd never done. And I went into the interview process, and yeah, the code I wrote was probably a bit janky. And I showed them some React work that I'd done, which I'm more familiar with. But as a result of that, I was able to show them that I was willing to learn. And as John said, it's about the no ego, the humility, and the fact that you're able to accept feedback and grow as a developer, because that's the thing. They're taking a chance on you and molding you into a future senior who will be the kind of person that they'll want other people to learn from. And if you can demonstrate those qualities, and it is so important. And I actually am a firm believer that it's 60% soft skills, 40% technical skills to get your first job in tech.
It's a fair point. It's a fair comment, I think.
Yeah, and we touched on London earlier. Would you recommend? I guess this is more directed towards people in Western Europe and the UK already. But would you say London's a good place if you want to get your first tech job?
I think there is such a supportive ecosystem for people in London that it makes complete sense to still come here. I mean, even if you're looking at other big hubs, you know, even in Germany, in France, I think there's such a big melting pot of people in London still. Like there's so many, it's such a diverse place to be with so many different realms of experience. Um, it's a, and I think people are willing to help. There's a lot of groups out there at the moment where you can get mentorship and personal and professional development and all that type of stuff. So I would 100% say London's a fantastic place to be. It still is. I don't think much has changed there.
Yeah, it's definitely a good place to be in. Moving there when I graduated, it was a great experience, and the opportunities there are fantastic, and there's a lot of really cool startups. FANG organizations as well are there. The UK in general is a fantastic place to be a developer, but London's pretty awesome, and I definitely recommend it. So I'm glad you agree, and it's definitely worth looking at. And we're aiming to in the near future have some London-based vacancies on the Coder Career website. And would your position at the Pioneers, would that be London-based, or is that for anyone in the UK to work remotely? How would that work?
We are remote first, but we understand that there is a desire for people to want to go into the office at the moment, just to meet, to interact. So we're not going to put you must be in for X period of time, but the ability to come to the office would probably be helpful because especially being a junior, you might want to ask for some help. You might need some context on something. It's easier just to turn and ask rather than having to say, "Are you free to talk?" These types of things I think are going to be quite important to help support and mentor someone. But then obviously when you need to code, we're very aware that people need 3-4 hours of solid head down code without distraction. So there's that ability as well. We understand that. So that's hopefully what we're trying to move towards.
Awesome. That sounds great. And kind of segueing into a related point here. If you're a software engineer who is quite junior, maybe not had much experience dealing with recruiters, even for non-technical stuff, how can they tell that a position they're being offered an interview for is a good position and whether it's a good opportunity? Are there any green or red flags that you would suggest?
Um, so are we talking that this person's actually in the process now, right? They're in the interview.
Uh, I would. You know what? Both actually, because both in the initial message and the advertisement to the point where you're maybe doing a phone screen and a cultural interview, because there's a few different points to look out for, I suppose.
Yeah, I think it all depends on the context. But I mean, if we start with some tips on how to deal with recruiters in that situation, I think there's some key things that you should be aware of around some not best practices that are performed in the recruitment industry, which is like just putting up job advertisements to try and generate candidates to make so they can actually speak to them, find out what's going on in the market, and and talk to them for if a job does come up. So to try and make sure that you understand that, or to get to the bottom of whether a job is real, ask things like, is this a real job? Like, is there actually a real vacancy? And if they, people can say yes, but it's, so what's the company's story? What's their biggest challenge? What exactly would I be doing? What are the benefits of this company? Like, if you ask them questions that they really have to think about and they can't answer it, you'll get a pretty clear idea as to whether this is a real position or not. From a company perspective, if you're approaching companies directly, I think one of the main things is you're in demand, right? Remember that, right? You're in demand. That you don't have to take that in an arrogant way, like, oh, I can do whatever I want, demand whatever salary I want. But make sure you speak about salary very early. People have the tendency to avoid this topic. And one of the biggest reasons we see people not taking a job that's been offered is because there's a divide between the salary that you want versus what the company wants to pay, and nobody's spoken about it. They've just gone, oh, this person's really good, or she's amazing, or he's great, and it comes to that point, and nobody's discussed the salary. So definitely talk about that early. um, Understanding what the work environment's like. If you get an interview, reach out to some people who are working there. Reach out to some other developers and say, look, hi there, I have an interview with your company. Is there anything you can give me some tips about the company? Or can I have a quick chat with you to understand more? Don't be afraid to do that. Like, what I wouldn't be afraid to ask these type of things. And then when you're in the actual company, the actual interview, sorry, I'd probably say really dig deep on what it's like to work there. Like, what's the culture really like? Are they saying, oh, it's great, we've got a ping pong table, it's amazing, but nobody's ever allowed to use the ping pong table and you have to work from 7 till 10 every single day, 7 a.m. till 10 p.m. Uh, or if it is that, just understand what's the biggest challenges you have, right? There is no way there is a startup out there that's growing that hasn't got problems or challenges. Understand it. If you know it early on, then you're not going to be in for a shock, right? So use it as a way to assess if the company's right for you as well as if you're right for that company. And I think you can do that by asking those types of questions. Just dig a little bit deeper. And if you're unsure of something, ask for clarification on anything.
Yeah, definitely. And I think those are some really good points on the fact that an interview is a two-way process. You're assessing the company as much as they're assessing you, and people sometimes get panicked or afraid of that. And the other thing to remember as well, particularly dealing with external recruiters, they're not your boss. You don't have to do what they say, and you don't need to be afraid to question them at all. And they should be happy to be questioned. And honestly, if someone reacts badly to being questioned about company culture or that kind of thing, it's probably a major red flag anyway, and you shouldn't continue with that interview process.
I would just clarify and iterate that you want to make sure that you don't want to come across like somebody who's trying to take control of the situation and interviewing them like, tell me everything, but just subtly ask the questions, and just make sure that you have clarity around the things that you want to know. What would my personal development look like? Do you have this? Is there a budget for that? Like, is there investment in me? If not, that's cool. If it's just going to be for 18 months that I'm going to work here because it's a startup, like, and that's the thing. Remember, most people in a tech startup are staying there for 12, 18 months, 2 years at a push. And you get the odd person that's there for longer, but typically people are there for 18 months. So just be aware of that. That it's not a forever job, right? Nobody's taking a startup job
It's not a
forever,
life
right?
sentence. Yeah.
No, exactly.
There's no such thing as a forever job anyway, I think, unless you're being self-employed. There's no such thing as a forever job. And I think that's something maybe sort of the generation above us and the generation above that don't understand so much. They find it a bit weird that people happily leave jobs after 12 to 18 months. But you have to, people, you're kind of you're a commodity in the labor market, right? And you can take advantage of your position, not just have not be taken advantage of. So it's obviously you don't want to quit every job after 6 months, because I've seen people do that and it catches up to you. But don't be afraid to leave a job after a little while if you feel like you've already got everything you wanted out of it and you feel like you've contributed enough.
I think on that, just to build on that one point, it's as soon as you stop learning or you feel like you're not learning, leave. If you're not learning, you're not growing, you're not improving. So just I would have a conversation about it. Don't just like, right, I haven't learned anything, so I'm leaving. But I would definitely speak. And once you're into the role, I know we've deviated slightly. We've gone to the next couple of steps. People have got the job now, but make sure you're asking for that support. Make sure you're talking to your direct manager and explaining, the path that you want to go, and see how your employer can support you.
And you should definitely define a path. That's something that I've been doing at work recently with my management, and it's been really great because we've been able to define a path of how I can progress, not just over the next 3 months, but over the next 2 to 3 years. And that that's an exciting prospect, and it gives you some clear goals to strive for, and it's very motivating. And you need to make sure it's not just technical skills that you're learning as well, but maybe have a goal in mind where you want to speak at a meetup in a year. That's a way for, as a junior developer, you can really kickstart your confidence, especially if you don't like public speaking that much. Like for me, one motivation behind starting this podcast was I wanted to get better at speaking, and it's a very important skill to have no matter what job you do. Because if you're dealing with key stakeholders, if you're able to speak coherently and well, it's a really important skill. Cool. And my kind of final question for you, John, as someone that has now been in the tech industry for quite a while with recruiting and company building, how would you say we can address the skills gap that we have in the UK right now? Like we have plenty of developer jobs, but not too many developers. What can we do about that?
That's a very it's a difficult question, right? I don't think there is an answer to this right now. That there's no silver bullet answer. I don't think, right? I believe that there's some short term things that we can do. We could make better visas for and make it an easier process for these types of jobs, because and I mean, I said this. I did an interview a couple of years ago at London Tech Week, and it was when the government had released a new visa, but it was for the entrepreneurs, which is great because it creates the opportunities. But you're creating opportunities, and there's nobody to fill these roles, right? So I think there needs to be a bit of a revamp in the system of allowing software engineers to get into the country from everywhere. Yes, there needs to be a certain standard of a level, that people have to adhere to, of course, and whatever. But I think that kind of like assessment would be done through the interview process anyway, to keep the bar high. So something around that. I think we should be giving more people an opportunity. So people like yourself that retrained, I think there should be more opportunities given to people like this. And I also think that companies who are hiring for graduate engineers need to put better learning and development plans in for these types of people, so they can ramp up and their time to effectiveness can be reduced drastically. There has to be something done around that. um, and outside of that, I don't know if there's anything major you could do right now. That gap exists, and there's only so many people that can fill these gaps, right? So you just need to attract them to the UK, but that's not overall fixing the total problem. And then like the medium to long term plan is, how do you get more people into software engineering from the grassroots level? Like, how does that work? How are you going to get people in? How do you make it exciting? How do you make it attractive? Um, I mean, I couldn't comment on intake of people taking up these courses at the moment, but there has to be stuff done at STEM level. Um, yeah, from very very early years, getting kids into this. Um, I think the CEO of Google said the other day, it was like, your kids are going to grow up with tech. You're going to have to teach them to live with tech. So instead of everyone having this negative worry about, oh my God, my kid's on an iPad, I mean, as long as they're just not sitting there looking at Paw Patrol for 10 hours in a row, and they could be interacting with really cool companies. Companies like Lego, fantastic. Like, I've got a little six and a half year old
Yeah.
boy, little Harry, and he loves Lego. And I've just seen something come out where you can interact with the Lego in the iPad, so you can actually program the Lego to
Hmm.
move. Right, this is really, like, really good ways of and innovative ways of getting kids into this. You've got Roblox, you've got all this type of stuff. Um, so I think we have to educate parents as well about the benefit of children being in this space as well. It's not just oh my God, my kid's going to sit there. They're just going to look at an iPad. They're not going to get out and do any exercise type thing. And they're going to get square eyes from looking at a screen for too long, right? As I used to get told as a kid. So I think that there has to be an educational piece around it for parents as well. Um, And yeah, so I think there's some short term and long term things that we can do. But yeah, mainly just give people opportunities. Give people the opportunities. It's like when people say there's not enough women in tech. There's a million. There's over a million women in tech now. Give them more opportunities. There is
In the
that
UK
element. There's
or
in
worldwide?
the in the UK, I spoke to a lady called Jayan. Yeah, we spoke on. She was a director of technology, I believe, at Goldman's and a couple of other like investment type banks. She was a Google mentor as well, and she gave me this. She gave me this piece of information. And it's about it's going in the right direction, but it's still not where it needs to be. But we just need to encourage more people from different backgrounds to get involved because, like, if you look at like you're a prime example, you're a white male in programming. It's it's a pretty it's the pretty dominant force workforce, isn't it? It's like how can we get more people from different groups of people into this as well and excited by software engineering, and I think that also again it's all about education. So yeah, I would definitely say these two things.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. And I think as well on the last point, there's definitely a snowball effect of once positive actions start to be taken and you see positive results, that it will grow exponentially, and we'll have something that reflects where it needs to be really. So I think the trends are in the right direction, but we can the more work that gets put in, particularly at the school level, then the better results we're going to see over the long term. And from what I've heard, the schools have started improving it, and there's a lot of potential there. And I think if we continue to embrace our tech industry and provide mentorship opportunities, then it's and also as well helping career changes, like people that maybe have are going back into tech after starting a family and that kind of thing. Um, it's a really great way to bring new people into the industry, because it's not the hardest thing in the world to learn. Like, there's a reputation for it being really hard. It's not. Like, how many other careers can you get into after doing like a 12-week course? Not many. So it's great, and I highly recommend anyone who's maybe listening to this out of curiosity to just do some free online classes and see what you think, because it's not as intimidating as people make it out to be.
Yeah, and a good tool for that to look at is Udemy is a very good. If you just want to have a little look and try, make sure you go in incognito mode because you get a cheaper price. I don't know if
Yeah.
that hack still works, but make sure you do it. You save yourself about 100 quid. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
and
yeah,
free code
definitely do
camp as
that.
well. It's totally free. You should try that as well. There's no advertisement, so that's really good.
Yeah, exactly. But I think just the final point is around the educational piece. It's raising awareness of what possible jobs there are in tech. There's a whole wide ranging like level of jobs that you can get into, but people just don't know
Yeah,
what they are or don't know how to get into it.
people think it's all
So
like
yeah,
embedded software and that kind of thing, which is really
yeah,
complicated. And actually, there's and most of my work is front end, which is I really enjoy, and it's not like you're doing really complicated maths or anything. It's about thinking about how users interact with things and how we can provide a great user experience.
but then you also have the possibility to go into like other stuff that could excite you, like like that kind of engineering. If you want to go and work in a Formula One company or something like this, is very cool. Yeah, that that's that whole industry there as well that needs to be
Yeah.
cracked as well. So
Yeah, there's a lot. We could definitely continue talking about that for hours, but both of our lunch hours sort of rapidly winding up. So, yeah, I mean, I just want to say a massive thank you for coming on, John. And it would be great to have you as a guest again in the future, because I think we barely scratched the surface of what the experience you've had in the technical industry, recruiting and building teams. So, have you got anything else you want to shout out about the pioneers or anything like that while we're still here?
yeah, I mean, one, we're hiring for a junior software engineer at the moment. So if you want to come and work with some really cool technology, you want to work in a serverless architecture, you want to use all the coolest tools out there, and work with no code type work to allow people ops people to create automations and stuff is a very very interesting opportunity. Um, and also if you're a HR professional or a people person, that is looking at how do I scale a company with all the social complexity that comes with that as you scale, come and have a chat to us. No obligation to buy anything or engage with us, but just have a chat. You never know, we might be able to point you in the right direction, and we can give you a free copy of our People OS canvas to have a look at.
Excellent.
Well, thanks for having me, Cam. I've really enjoyed it.
Oh, likewise. Thank you for coming on, and all your links will be in the description of this podcast. Anyone who's curious, please do check out The Pioneer. Also, as well, get in touch with us. Follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram. I've finally set that up, and our website as well, which is in a constant state of development, but I'm sure it'll be live soon, hopefully. So please check that out for the latest news, views, and jobs in tech. But until next time, thanks for listening to The Coder Career. This has been Cam Blackwood. See you next time.